doing? How are you?
Not too bad, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today with Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
But I do have some questions.
There are more questions than answers.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoy this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us as we invite you to be a part of our very special production, not just because of what we're going to cover or the people we're going to engage. It's the CI Retro Talk Today series, and we're going to be talking about a historical perspective on hurricane preparedness. So please stay tuned for Talk Today.
Talk Today is brought to you by Fidelity Bank. For all your banking needs, visit fidelitygroup.com. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Also brought to you by greenturtle.ky. Take a ride on the Green Turtle Express today. Download the Green Turtle app. The future of mobile. Saving lives today. Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email Talk Today at candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255.
Courtesy of Flow.
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you again for joining us. I want you to assemble and be seated very, very comfortably for this very special CI Retro Talk Today Cayman's special presentation. Our focus today will be on the historical look at what we call bad weather hurricane preparedness over the years, pre-1932 to 1944 through the 1950s and the 60s, bad weather systems, storms, hurricanes, and the like. We'll be looking at Hurricane Allen, Hurricane Gilbert, Paloma, Ivan, and to the present. It's going to be aimed at sensitizing the Cayman's community to, 19.3 north and 81.2 west position and the potential level of risk that we face during the hurricane season. Now, Mr. Loxley, right now, we're starting to share that idea of a longitude and latitude. That's fascinating. I may be minded to ask you something about our positioning on the map. But together with Mr. Loxley Banks, we're going to bring you this special CI Retro Talk Today presentation. We've got some very, very important and influential guests joining us to help us in that effort. Some of them are going to be here in the studio. Others are going to be joining us via the telephone. And between them, the subjects and the experience and the historical perspective they're going to share, I'm going to give you as I see it, a perspective on what we have experienced over the last century or thereabouts when it comes to, not just the nor'wester, but a serious hurricane impact. So, Mr. Loxley, thank you, sir, with the sincerity for the effort, the diligence, the enthusiasm, but the manner in which you bring this to the fore is incredible. So, good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much, man.
Well, thank you, sir, Sterling, for all that. And I think we got to move right along here and get to those guests that we've got scattered over the island.
There you go.
And first of all, gentlemen, as I introduce you, give us just a 30-second introduction of yourselves. And first of all, we would like to welcome Mr. Fred Sambulo, former Director General of the Cayman Islands National Weather Service. Fred? Hello, Fred.
Good afternoon, sir.
You hear me?
Yeah,
yes. We're in remote here. You just take a cue from us. And
okay. Well, luckily you have basically introduced me, so I don't have to say anything else. I'll just be here on the radio and listening to everybody and field the questions as they come. So I was the director of the National Weather Service during one of the worst hurricanes that Cayman Islands experienced. And I'll be willing to talk about that. So good afternoon to everybody, and goodbye.
Okay, well, don't say goodbye. Stick around. And also on the line with us is Deputy Governor and Deputy Chairman of the National Hurricane Committee, former, that is, Donnie Ebanks, Mr. Donovan Ebanks. Donnie?
Yeah, hi, Loxley. Hi, Sterling. Good to be with you.
Afternoon, sir.
Good that there's no serious weather out there for us to be talking about right now, which is more commonly what was the experience when you were on Radio Cayman. But, yeah, I mean, you know, it's certainly something that we'll never get away from. I mean, this time of year will always bring risks. There's obviously evidence that those risks aren't getting any less, and if anything, they're increasing thanks to things like climate change. But, you know, there are also significant advances being made in terms of what we can do to mitigate those risks, and I think that's really an area that we have to continue to prioritize. And probably the final thing is, you know, to try not to so quickly forget the lessons that we should have learned, 15 years ago from Ivan. I mean, you know, we had some good learning in the immediate few years after, but it seems that a lot of that is fallen by the wayside. So we can talk about some of that today.
And that's what this is all about, trying to sensitize our community as to, as we mentioned before, the risk in that position that we occupy, and you know, just make sure everybody is up to speed, or as well up to speed as they can. And in the studio, actually, here with us is Mr. Simon Boxall, Deputy Director of Asset Management, Cayman Islands. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much, Luxie. Thank you, everybody, all the listening public. My background, I guess, was initially as a journalist interviewing people like Mr. Kirkland Nixon, Mr. Donovan Ebanks, and later Mr. Fred Sambula about hurricanes, and experiencing some myself, Hurricane Gilbert, when I was living in Little Cayman. Prior to that, Hurricane Andrew, when I was at university in Miami, doing documentaries on things like Hurricane Mitch that hit the Bay Islands, and then experiencing Hurricane Ivan firsthand, and then 11 years at Hazard Management, which Mr. Donovan Ebanks has, and very wisely sort of led the charge in forming, along with other early pioneers.
Okay, well, that's good. And of course, we have also on the line Captain Paul. You there, Captain?
I'm right here.
Okay, well, welcome to the program, and we'll be calling on you in just a little bit for some of your wisdom from over the years. So just stand by.
1 second.
And finally, the current Director General of the Cayman Islands Weather Service, Mr. John Tibbetts, and he will be joining us later in the program. Now that we've got all the introductions, right here we have to tell you that CI Retro Talk Today's special presentation is being brought to you by the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports and Health. They're always working diligently to protect the sustainability of the history and the heritage and culture of the Cayman Islands. The knowledge of this culture, history, and heritage is continually promoted through the effort of that team. It is said that the success of our future is greatly dependent on the level of light we can shine on our past. So we thank them very much. Other sponsors are Parsons Air Conditioning, Refrigeration and Appliances at 312 Church Street, West Church Street, that is, in West Bay. You can call Parsons at 949-3945 for all of your air conditioning, refrigeration, and appliance needs. Available now at Parsons is the affordable ultralight, which cleans and kills airborne contaminants and pathogens. Ratification of mold mildew to include COVID-19, and freshens the air in the surrounding area. And I think we got some more commercials to add on to this, and then we'll be right back to pick up again on the program.
Green Turtle, modern solutions to get you through the new normal. Download the Green Turtle app now and top up yours or a loved one's phone with any mobile carrier in any destination. Home delivery of laptops, tablets, phones, accessories, and iTunes and major online retailer gift cards. And now, home deliveries of groceries and courier service. Guaranteed delivery within 2 hours from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit their list of products at greenturtle.ky or download the Green Turtle app today. Green Turtle is not only the future of mobile, but today it can help save a life. Take a ride on the Green Turtle Express today. Download the Green Turtle app. The future of mobile, saving lives today.
Register now for the 3rd Annual Chamber of Commerce Economic Forum, taking place online on Friday, August 14th. This year's theme, Rebuilding a Better Cayman, will tackle the effects the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the local and regional economy and how the private and public sectors can work together to create a more durable and more sustainable future. Don't miss out. Visit caymanchamber.ky to register for a full day or half day today. Corporate ticket bundles available. In partnership with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. The forum is made possible thanks to sponsors CUC, DART, Kensington Management Group, Cayman Enterprise City, and Hurley's Media.
Your Radio Cayman 7 a.m. news, brought to you by Cayman National, proudly serving the Cayman Islands since 1974. Visit www.caymannational.com for up-to-date information for all your financial needs and follow us on social media.
Hi, this is Danny Coleman, Director of Hazard Management Cayman Islands. We are now in the hurricane season, and for information on how to prepare and stay safe, please visit our website, www.caymanprepared.ky. Some top tips to bear in mind, given that we are still in the midst of COVID-19. Please make sure you have a mask and sanitizer, you have food supplies that last for 3 to 5 days, a portable radio, personal hygiene and sanitation items, and medical supplies, and any other specific items your family may need during a hurricane. Make sure you know where you will shelter in the event of a storm. If you have pets, please make sure provisions are in place for them too, as the majority of shelters will not take pets. Please visit our website for more tips and tricks on www.caymanprepared.ky or call us on 945-4624. Stay safe, Cayman.
Talk today. But I do have some questions.
Talk today. Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
And we're back on with the show. We look now at some of the many bad weather storms, and many years ago that's what the weather systems were referred to, bad weather coming. But bad weather storms, hurricanes, and the related preparedness practices from our past, such as the barometer, notice boards and flags, rooftops, tie-downs, battened windows and doors, bent back nails, and that there was a story about that in Post Ivan. The sundogs, the sky indicator and tides, sea and wind activity, flight of the man-of-war, sun crossing the line, and when we get to Captain Paul, he will tell us a bit about that. And also the Guantanamo base aircraft flyover and vessels in the Sound, and that was a real telltale when you saw them headed into the North Sound, and many other things. So, gentlemen, let's hear your thoughts. Captain Paul, what do you remember about some of those things that we mentioned there?
Yeah, I remember quite a lot about that. I don't remember the 32, but I remember the 44. 44 was a very, but you don't hear many people mention that, but it was a bad hurricane here. The schooner Albion was lost in that hurricane. She was anchored in Georgetown because my uncle Carl Bushy was the captain of her, and they tried on Saturday they tried to get her in the car around to the Sound, but when they got past Northwest Point, he said it was just too rough. He couldn't make it. So they had to come back in Georgetown and anchored her there. And on Sunday evening, my cousin Val Hulston and myself, it was rough. It was big seas coming over, so we was walking to Georgetown. Of course, I had to walk it out there to see what was going on. And we got as far as a few of you will know where Dr. Roy House was, Dr. Roy McTaggart House, and a heavy squall came. It was overcast and blowing very hard, but there was no rain at that time. But this heavy squall came over, and we, as the old caveman say, we dodged on the porch of Dr. Roy House, and that squall and the wind really picked up, and that squall must have lasted 35, 40 minutes or more. Anyhow, when it was all over, the Albion wasn't there anymore, and nobody's ever seen her since.
What do you got any knowledge of the Sun Dogs?
Yeah, I've seen them. It looks like a little piece of a rainbow
in the sky.
In the sky. No, that was the old people used to say that was a sign of bad weather. I don't know if that's really true or not, because I've seen one recently too.
Miss Captain Paul, I have an account too of the 32 hurricane. I don't remember it firsthand.
You sure?
Remember, it says here the schooner Albion was lost in Georgetown Harbour, and the Gravina and the Armistice wrecked.
No, that I don't think that's correct, because that's not correct. So let's get around to that a little, because the Gravina and Armistice. In fact, I came back from Cuba on Armistice in 1946. So
okay, well maybe I'm on the wrong. I got my history apparently.
Let's move on here to to those guys on the line there. Donnie, any comments on some of those things that we mentioned?
Actually, those are before my time, my friend.
You sure you don't remember the 32 to 44 storm?
No, but I was listening to Simon there.
See, that's why the recollection of memory.
And well, Sam, you can shoot at us from a scientific standpoint. How about sun dogs?
I don't know anything about those. I'll pass on that.
But I think the flags and so forth was used. In fact, they may be are they still a part of the preparedness?
Absolutely, yeah. They go on the government buildings, the police station, the schools, and things like that. Yes, we still use the flags, and they're in the possession of government buildings only. We do get requests occasionally from private companies wanting to erect the flags, but we make sure that they stay within the control of government.
Well, that's a good idea.
Right, we want them up at the right time and down the right
yes,
time.
Yes, definitely. But you know, I haven't heard any information recently on the significance of those flags, because I think there are 3 or 4 different levels of flags.
Well, there are obviously flags that represent for tropical storm as well as for hurricane. Yeah. So the triangular one's a tropical storm, and then you have the square flags, which are the all clear as well. You have the green for the all clear, and then the square for the warning phase. No flag for alert.
No. And you know, we mentioned the barometer, and I know that's something that Captain Paul, who's very familiar with, and he can give us just a little quick thing about the barometer.
Oh yes, the barometer. Well, that's all we had in those days. The barometer, and I think it was about two or three here in South Sound. So Captain Dick Bush, my father, and my grandfather Charles Bush had one. I don't remember the other one was. And everybody was going there to the house to find out about the barometer, what that was doing.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. That was a very important aspect of preparedness. I can remember my mother telling me, go up to your grandfather Samuel's house and see what the barometer is doing. And I'd come back down, and Lola said the barometer is falling. That's bad news, And I think the barometer was actually invented back in 1664 by a Italian by the name of, I can't recall the name, but anyway, and it also, actually before that, Galileo had some thoughts about pressures and so forth, and how it could be measured with the use of mercury, because the mercury is a very, important part of that barometer.
Yeah, that was an old one. They used to call that the glass. It looked like a walking stick, and I was on one ship that had an old English ship that had that on. That's the first one I ever seen beside the pictures of it, and but they used to call that what they refer to what is the glass doing if it's rising or falling.
Oh, okay, all right. And then of course, those seabirds, those big man o' wars, they always, I think they've got a built-in barometer in their body, because when pressure started to fall, they recognized it and they moved away from the coast and they'd come inland, and that was another big sign of that people would take up, and as we referred to before, bad weather coming. Bad weather's coming. You see the man o' war's coming in? Yeah.
Also, Loxley, the soldier crabs.
Yeah, yes.
The soldier crabs climbing up a tree, the weather's not good.
That's right, yeah. And they don't normally do that.
No.
They go up the tree. Yeah. And then, of course, the rooftop tie-downs, I guess just about every house on the island would tie their roofs down with thatch rope. And that was another very, valuable precaution as to being prepared for what was coming.
Yeah, that's correct. By the middle of the year, everybody had a couple, coils of coils. But in hindsight, it really didn't make much sense, because what it did. But I guess there's a little piece of mind say you did something, because this kind of wind you get from a hurricane, that rope was very much support. Yeah, and I know once you started, if you were walking along the street and you saw everybody trying to push their cat boats up in the bushes, something else was afloat, huh? But there's another, excuse me for taking over the show. But,
no, go ahead.
But it's one other thing that all the old timers, all the houses was built up on, stilts. We call them Cayman language, posts, so that the water could run freely under them, and also the wind, because I used to stand on the lee side of one of those houses up on stilts. You see the quantity, the pressure wind that come down to that floor.
Yes.
So, because, the 7-Eleven started in the shop, whether or not the 32 and the 44 and all.
That's right, yeah, and it's still standing there.
Standing there.
Yeah. Well, where I grew up, our back door was 50 feet from the water, and, I guess the house was at least, I'd say, 24 inches. That is, the floor of the house was 24 inches above the earth, and there were times when the sea would come up and wash onto our floor. In fact, I recall one morning, and this was not a hurricane, this was just what we call bad weather, getting up early, actually to go milk the cows. And when I opened the back door and looked down, there was about a 30-pound hawksbill sitting right down at the foot of the steps.
Breakfast?
Well, no. Somebody had injured him, had struck him, and he just couldn't handle himself in the weather. And but I butchered him and sold and sold the shell. My mother didn't want me to do it, but I said, no, I'm going to sell the shell.
Oh, boy.
And we're moving right along. Any Donnie or Sam, you got any further comments you want to come in on this? Or
No, I mean, I'm grateful to Captain Paul and his recollection. He got a few years on us, and glad to have him with us today, and certainly happy to hear some of his recollections.
Yeah.
Yes. Loxley, I think Simon touched on a good point about the flags, but I think we need more education of people into exactly the significance and meaning of these flags. I think they have all gone astray, especially now with television. Nobody pays too much mind to the flags. So we have to find some sort of educational scheme to keep people apprised of what we do in Cayman for storm alerts. So I think that's a point that we need to take into account, that people have to be constantly trained and taught about these things.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it has to be a recurring educational process. Total. I think Donnie would probably remember this. Maybe you even, Sam. Back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, everything we were blanketing, that is, Radio Cayman was blanketing the community with messages about preparedness, and the political that was around then tried to suppress some of that, because their position was, you're frightening everybody. We say, no, we're not frightening everybody. We'd like for everybody to have a little fear in them about where we're at. And Simon, I think more of that needs to come on the surface, in the immediate.
I mean, I agree. We've just had the NOAA forecast update today, and that's the most active season they've ever called for. And that comes also on the heels of the Colorado State prediction. So NOAA's calling for 19 to 25 hurricanes. So the remainder of the season looking incredibly active. Obviously, I think people are already quite a little bit shaken up by COVID-19, earthquake, funnel clouds, Saharan dust.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't want to overly traumatize them, but like you say, I think, people's lives are at risk in these things, so we need to make sure that they are appropriately informed, and we appreciate the opportunities we have with Radio Cayman. We were on yesterday and also a couple of days ago, but it's very interesting to have the historical perspective as well, and look at, like you say, Captain Paul was talking about the houses on posts and how that allowed the water to flow underneath, and I think, there's a lot of lessons we can take from, things like that, we should really bear in mind today, even more, especially with sea level rising, as Mr. Donovan Ebanks mentioned, and more frequent storms.
Okay, well, I think the listening public should get just a little bird's eye view of some of the things that was used in the past for preparedness, and time's moving on. So I think we need to get on to this next segment, which is about the 32 hurricane, and we'll hear now a short recorded narrative about one of the most ferocious hurricanes to hit our islands in 1932. And some of the voices that you'll hear on this insert, Mrs. Nina Connolly from East End. And this was recorded some, I think, 38 years ago. And you can think now, she was talking about probably 50 to 60 years prior to that. So you'll see how far back this goes. Also, Mrs. Ina Watler and former Chief Secretary, I think he did occupy when it calls Chief Secretary and Acting Administrator, Mr. Ernest Panton, and of course Captain Keith Tibbett. So Susan, if you'll bring that, and Doran Miller is sort of conducting this talk. So Susan?
How many days did it take to discover exactly how many people were killed or missing in this hurricane?
Just about 2 days, because this happened on Wednesday, the damage was done, and on Friday night, a rescue ship arrived from Jamaica, the MV Huswick, owned by J.S. Webster & Sons, formerly of Grand Cayman, and they brought home some of the people from the island that were in Jamaica, and figured that the island was destroyed, following the track of the hurricane in the papers and stuff, because there was no communications. And they came in there and they broadcast by wireless or sent out by wireless the messages, letting them know the damage. My father was one among those that came back home on that boat. It was a matter of the fittest survived, really, at that time, because we lost quite a few people besides the 109 that was actually lost on the island through dysentery, and I presume a certain amount of typhoid. We didn't know what it was actually, because we had no water until a British warship came in and brought us water. We had to bring it ashore in drums and get water. We didn't have rain for weeks and weeks after we had rain again. And in fact, there were bodies that wasn't found for months and months before some of the bodies were found. In the group where I was, we had 2 buried in one grave, my sister and a cousin, and we never found the other 3 for quite a while. In fact, I could give you the dates even that the other ones were found. My grandmother was found on Christmas Eve, which was 6 weeks afterwards, and our school friend, she was found in sometime in mid-December, and my baby brother wasn't found until March. Then, where I told you a while ago that with 22 killed from one house, it was 22 of them buried in one grave, and it's still there today. That grave is still there.
I've heard that the water, the tidal wave, was so bad that it did wash some coffins from the cemetery.
That is correct. Not in my area. We didn't have a grave, there was a cemetery in my area, but it did wash some of the caskets out of the ground. And the area particularly where that hit was at the creek. And it was a casket there that had only been in the ground about 4 weeks and washed it out. And they had to go to work and bury it back afterwards.
The devastation, once the sea receded, must have been horrifying.
It was unbelievable. I mean, to see that people could survive in conditions which you would see afterwards is unbelievable, actually. Next morning, it was 11 houses left standing. Out of 432 houses, there were 11 left standing next morning. And people, when the British warships came in, they brought tents. People lived in tents for months and months until houses could be built. And it was common to be 5 and 6 families live in one house. A whole family live in a room. You had nowhere else to live.
Yes, we were compelled to live on a tent for 17 weeks. We had one tent where we slept and one tent where we cooked. And the sandflies were never as thick in the history of the island as after that hurricane. They just sort of smothered you all the time. It was terrible.
It must have taken quite a long time to get things back to normal, though.
Oh, yes, we often say that we don't know what we ever lost because we never found other things. Some of the corrugated roofing on our house was way up into the pond, and it looked like you had crushed up newspaper and you hadn't thrown it there.
And in those days, getting supplies to rebuild would take such a long time.
The supplies is a different story. The motor vessel Balboa turned up here in Georgetown Harbor. Well, she happened to have had lumber and kerosene oil aboard. And the lumber from her was what went to build back most of the houses. We got lumber from Grand Cayman to build the houses back. And the people really took the initiative and they solved whatever they could from their old houses and built back. Naturally, they had to build smaller ones and built their houses back. And it really went on at a terrific pace to see how quick people got houses built back. The greatest demand was for nails. I remember plainly that you could only put one nail in where you should put probably 3 or 4. You only put one until you could get nails to do it with. And corrugated iron was really the biggest question, but when the relief ship came from Jamaica, they brought corrugated iron for us. But they never thought about bringing nails or wood.
Strange enough, in Georgetown, the houses remained almost intact. There were only 1 or 2 small shacks that went down in Georgetown. There was no loss of life. There were no injuries at all in Georgetown.
And what did you do for food?
Well, my father had a warehouse in our yard, and he had a lot of stuff in his store there. We had particularly margarine. We had candy, biscuits. Well, the biscuits were wet. They were no good, but we had margarine and candy there. And that was the most of what we survived on until next morning. We got food late next day. The house we got to had saved some food. We had lost everything in our area with nothing left there. Besides the margarine, which is in tins, and we saved a lot of them. And condensed milk, we had a lot of condensed milk there too. That's what we survived on. On Sunday, one of the Royal Mail ships came to Jamaica with supplies for us, and then by Monday we got a supply of food. Of course, before I just had enough to keep alive, and that was all. And we just had enough clothes to keep us from going naked because everybody lost their clothes. And what they did, anyone that had clothes shared them up with the other one. But they bought clothing and they brought supplies. And then a relief boat also came from Belize. And they brought a lot of food and clothing. And the boat came from Grand Cayman. The Nunoco came from Grand Cayman, brought medical aid. And that was one of the things that we needed so badly with medical aid because so many people cut up, bruised up, sick, and everything else. In fact, when the boat came from Jamaica, brought a doctor and a nurse. One of the first jobs they had to do was amputate the lady's leg.
Well, food was very hard to get. All the food they had then was what to get out of the plantation.
And most of those were destroyed.
Yeah, all the plantation, every bit of cassava, everything was drowned. It was nothing to get. Plenty want after that.
The government must have had a tremendous job trying to assess the damage within the 3 islands and to offer assistance and so on, which I believe they did as soon as possible.
It did. It was a terrific strain. The commissioner at the time was Lieutenant Colonel Weston. One of the first things that he did, I can't remember what means it was, but he managed to get a United States destroyer called the Overton. I remember her well, to come to Grand Cayman, and she took him along with a few other officials and went to Cayman Brac, where he saw exactly the damage that was done there and learned about all the lives and so on that were lost. Well, of course, we knew that before he went to Cayman Brac, because as soon as the Simboco, the boat that ran between here and Cayman Brac and Jamaica, arrived here, she wasn't in. She was in Jamaica and got to Cayman Brac the very next day after the storm, having escaped the storm, and he was able through her to get in touch with the outside world.
Then the government, of course, had the problem of setting up food relief centers because all plantations, I'm told, had been lost.
Right, and as soon as possible, yes, we set up food centers in Georgetown, West Bay, and the different districts.
The government had a program. He sent food in to feed the poorer class or the people who couldn't afford to buy, but who could afford to buy the food, bought food. And who couldn't afford to buy the food, the government feed them with food every weekend.
They were rationed, and you came down to Georgetown, and you received so much condensed milk or biscuits or flour and sugar, whatever they had. They gave so many families so many ounces or pounds to each family.
And, of course, aid came from abroad. We had some aid from Jamaica and Belize, the British government, in the form of cash and kind, and we borrowed some money. And one thing that Colonel Weston did was, as soon as possible after that, he said, well, the quickest way that I know to make some money is a set of stamps. It wasn't a set of stamps to remember the cyclone, but it was a set of stamps that has become the most valuable of all of ours, and that is a set of stamps that commemorates the centenary of the coming into being of the Legislative Assembly of Justices and Vestry. 1832 was 100 years for that.
That's a historical fact of which I was not aware. Thank you for letting me know about it. Mr. Ernest, how long, in your opinion, it must have taken years for the island to take on a semblance of being normal again, because we didn't have the mechanical tools to use in those days? And
I would say it took at least 10 years for us to really begin to look sort of normal again.
this sounds like an awfully silly question. Are there any funny incidents that you could recall in this great devastation?
You put me in a spot, Mr. Miller. There are some I don't know they should be able to be told. It was one couple that they were along with us, elderly couple actually, and they had a very rough time. But they separated from us after we left the house we were in. They separated from us and went in a different direction, and they were saved. And afterward, the old man telling the story, he had told us many times, he say if his wife had been underwater another half an hour, she'd have got drowned. He used that as a joke at home because it was almost unbelievable. I mean, how things went. Because, for instance, the same house that killed my sister, I was trying to save my grandmother at the time. The same house that killed her, come washing towards where I was, and I dove down. I was a good swimmer them days. I dove down to get clear of it, and I went through a door and got jammed by my foot.
So you were stuck there?
I was stuck there, but not happened, so I was near enough to the surface I could bend back to breathe. Then I had to sink down again to get my foot clear.
So today's generation really can't appreciate what a hurricane of that magnitude is really like.
Well, let's pray that we never have one like it, because I fear that so many people who've moved to the waterfront will be washed away that it wouldn't be funny.
My grandchildren tell me they would like to see a hurricane. But I tell them, if you see a hurricane, you will not forget it.
The preceding segments on the 1932 hurricane was produced by Darren Miller. Our thanks to all those who helped with the program.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash, and you're listening to Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Okay, well, you heard that short excerpt from some of the Wattle Vault archive about the 32 hurricane, and we'll come back to discuss some of them right after we get the news. It's news time on Radio Cayman.
Community radio with a different appeal. The voice of the people. Security through adversity. Stuck on you. Radio for all time.
You're listening to Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only two species that we have here on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. The National Roads Authority and its subcontractors are resurfacing Elgin Avenue between Elgin Avenue, Hospital Road, and Elgin and Shedden Road. Sections of Elgin Avenue will be closed to the motoring public between 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. In international news, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has outlined the steps he wants the U.S. companies to take to deal with Chinese apps. Mr. Pompeo says apps like TikTok and WeChat pose significant threats. Wednesday's announcement marks a further deterioration in relations between Washington and Beijing. Astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley have described returning from space in the Crew Dragon spacecraft on Sunday. Behnken described the clouds rushing by the window and jolts that were like being hit in the back of the chair with a baseball bat. But Hurley and Behnken said the spacecraft performed just as expected. They splashed down in the Gulf of Mexico, ending the first commercial crewed mission to the space station. 3 teenage boys have been arrested after inadvertently entering President Donald Trump's Florida resort with a loaded AK-47 assault rifle. A chase began after Palm Beach police attempted to approach their car. The boys, aged 15, jumped a wall while fleeing and were later found hiding on the property. Mr. Trump was not there at the time, and the resort is currently closed. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Your voice, your choice, your radio.
Important announcement for Caymanian tourism sector employees. The Ministry of Tourism's Displaced Tourism Employees Stipend has reopened for new registrants only until August 7. Caymanian tourism sector employees who have not yet applied for stipend program and are no longer employed are encouraged to apply via the online portal stipend.ourcayman.ky by August 7th. For more information, email stipend@caymanislands.ky.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best and sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Green Turtle, modern solutions to get you through the new normal. Download the Green Turtle app now and top up yours or a loved one's phone with any mobile carrier in any destination. Home delivery of laptops, tablets, phones, accessories, and iTunes and major online retailer gift cards. And now, home deliveries of groceries and courier service. Guaranteed delivery within 2 hours from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit their list of products at greenturtle.ky or download the Green Turtle app today. Green Turtle is not only the future of mobile, but today it can help save a life. Take a ride on the Green Turtle Express today. Download the Green Turtle app, the future of mobile, saving lives today.
Rotary Central supports our National Gallery, now open free to the public, providing access to healing, renewal, and reflection through the arts. An opportunity to visit, to traverse Cayman Memory Lane, heritage, faces, places, voices, fabric, glimpsing a wider dimension of who we are, where we have come from. Join us at the National Gallery. You will see the Island of Women exhibition featuring 26 local artists exploring invaluable contributions that Caymanian women have made to developing Caymanian society. See the remarkable Bendel Heights Acquisition Showcase. Bendel is our Picasso. View salt water in their veins, a new exhibition featuring 45 local artists as they explore Cayman's legendary relationship with the oceans of the world. The National Gallery of the Cayman Islands. 8 exhibitions currently on show between Cayman Brac, Grand Cayman, and virtual tours online. The National Gallery in full compliance with safe distance and health requirements. Book your visit in advance to avoid waiting for entry. Call 945-8111. Rotary Central and the National Gallery of the Cayman Islands, supporting wellness, healing in reflection. Rotary opens opportunities.
I've got some beautiful clothes. I know just where they go. Good and cleaner.
A reminder of the standard 10% off prepay on wedding dresses and gowns, also household items, drapes, bedspreads, area rugs, and more. 10% prepaid discount can also apply to all wearing apparel, $17 and up. These discounts at all our stores. Savannah Countryside, 946-1884. Elgin Avenue, 949-2452. 337 Eastern Avenue, drive-through rain or shine, 949-7104. Call our seamstress, Miss Kathy, at 949-2452. Elgin Avenue for all your adjustments and repairs. Puritan Cleaners. You feel good when you look good.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
And a lot of information in that cut there with Doran, Mr. Ernest Panton, and Miss Nina Connolly, and Mrs. Ina Watler, along with Captain Keith Tibbetts about that 32 hurricane experience. And before we jump into the discussion here, I want to remind you that this Radio Cayman's Talk Today special presentation is being brought to you by the Ministry of Health, Sports, Youth and Culture, and also by Parsons Air Conditioning and Refrigeration and Appliances at 312 West Church Street in West Bay. You can call Parsons at 949-3945. And gentlemen, as I said, a lot of discussion from that cut there. And Donnie, I'd be interested in your comments on the aspect of raising revenue by stamps.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's amazing that, that was something that they recognized back then, and it was something that they could be very successful with. I mean, I guess you don't need me to tell you that that is going to be a significant revenue option for us today.
No.
One of the concerns that I have in the current world we live in is that while we are generally seen to be relatively well off, our Ivan experience taught us that there are those who will nevertheless lend us some assistance. But in the world we live in, there are so many jurisdictions, but everyone has had to overextend themselves fiscally to cope with this pandemic. We need to be aware that there are inherent risks that if we were seriously affected, let's say this year or next year, or even for the next few years, that there is that possibility that people who would have wanted to be kind to us simply can't afford to be. So, I mean, it's just part of the new norm that we live in and how one thing impacts another. So, I think it's just something I think, we all need to be aware of, that, our neighbors and other people who would normally have been our benefactors, perhaps just won't be able to do as much as they could have done in the past. So it behoves us to be that much more prepared ourselves and that much more resilient, to these risks.
Sam, I'm sure you were listening there, and just what we could gather from what the descriptions that we heard, the ferocity of that wind and seas.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to dovetail on what Mr. Ebanks talked about just now. I mean, we saw that in the past, we got help from Jamaica, from Belize, from other places, but things are different now. Things could be different now with the pandemic also causing problems, and we might not get the assistance we would like as or we would wish for because of the pandemic. So we have two strands that we have to work with now to prevent any further explosion in our society. So the pandemic is one, and we have the hurricane season as one. So we have to be more careful and look within ourselves to see how we can utilize or increase our resilience. See? So that is what I have to say, and that's a very good point.
Okay, and Mr. Ernest, I think, mentioned that from the 1932 storm, back then it took them, he said, about 10 years to really come out of that. And I mean, compared with today and what they had to deal with back then, I suppose if we was to have to experience something along the lines of another Ivan or another 32, that I guess the devastation would probably be so much more increased, which would, of course, extend that recovery time. And I think these are things that we all have to be very, very cognizant of. And, you know, Mr. Patton mentioned a U.S. destroyer come. What I gathered, it just showed up in the harbor here, and they were able to more or less, I don't want to say comment at it, but they were able to get the assistance, and they took the administrator or commissioner, I guess at that time, to Cayman Brac. And but Sam, I mean, it is estimated that they had winds there of probably over 120 miles an hour at that 1932 hurricane. Yeah. And seas probably 12 to 15, maybe 18, 20, 25 feet.
Yes. And that alone goes to the amount of development we're taking on along the coast and the clearing of the mangroves. I see mangroves being cleared in the Cayman Islands like a dime a dozen. But those are our protection. And to clear these things so easily and quickly is not doing us any good. So I think we have to really get serious about our mangrove ecology and protect it even further, because that is a first line of defense.
Can I jump in?
Yes, yeah.
Mr. Donovan Ebanks again mentioned a very important point, I think, about the change in the landscape for support coming from overseas, but also how COVID affects people's thinking and planning with sheltering, and people maybe being scared. But I think we can see from that description of the 1932 hurricane that the risk of drowning is probably significantly higher than the risk of COVID-19. But we're talking about a storm surge, I think, in the 32 storm in excess of 20 feet. There's a mass grave in Cayman Brac for the 32 storm. I think 108 people in total, counting the people as well that were lost on schooners, died.
Yes.
I mean, I would like to get Mr. Sambula's perspective. If we had a hurricane the size of Hurricane Mitch, with a 20-foot surge, I think even with the advancements like the radar that he helped guide the process of us getting that through the European Union, we now have a law which allows us to issue evacuation orders. I don't think it's going to be legally, we're not going to yank people out of their houses. I think it's going to be strongly encouraged. But just sort of, I think with all the advancements in technology since 32, satellites and radar and everything, I still think we're vulnerable to the possibility of a very significant total loss of life if we have a very large storm bearing down on us and a direct impact. There are many, many houses in low-lying areas that are single story. And I just wondered whether that worries you, Mr. Sambula, still as it does me.
Well, in answer to that, I must say that the quality of construction of buildings in Cayman has improved tremendously. Because just taking examples of Hurricane Ivan, Hurricane Ivan passed within 20 miles of the Cayman Islands, right? And the buildings, yes, we had some roof damage, but most of them stood up, right? The storm surge was maximum about up to 12 feet in certain areas, right? But again, each storm is different, right? Each storm is different. The trajectory that Ivan took did not really come on land. It passed to the south of us. But if it shifted a little further to the north, we could have seen higher surges, right? But the buildings in Cayman have proven themselves to be really well built. Now, what we have to do is encourage people who live in areas at risk, to move from there and get into the buildings which are purposely built for hurricanes?
Well said there, Sam. And there's a lot of work to be done, and I don't suppose we would ever reach a point to where we thought that we had accomplished a complete mitigation of the risk, and that's a work that has to be all the time in progress. Donnie, any more you want to?
Well, yeah, I think Fred made some interesting points there about I think we all agree that the basic level of quality of construction here has been fairly good over the last 15, 20 years. We did have significant weaknesses in two areas that have been addressed, and I'm happy to see have been addressed. The first one was roof coverings. I mean, what we learned from Ivan was that buildings can stand up and the roofs can stay on in terms of the joists and the plywood, but we could get all of the asphalt base coverings ripped off, shingles, and with it tar paper, which we had converted to. We'd gone from zinc to these asphalt base products. There wasn't yet a high use of the adhesive asphalt base products, commonly referred to as ice and water shield. I think about 5 years ago, I remember post my retirement, reaching out to planning about this, following up what was happening. And I think about 5 years ago, we finally got to the point where we require all residential construction to use that ice and water shield cover on the plywood. Now, what that does for us is that if we lose shingles, we're probably 95% certain that we still have a secure layer in the ice and water shield that keeps out water from going into the house. That's what makes the house inhabitable, the water getting in from the roof. That's what then contributes to the high demand for us to house people. The other area which we had been working on and which has finally come to fruition is the requirement to have impact-resistant windows, hurricane impact-resistant windows, or shutters. And I'm told nowadays that all of the construction, even what would be classified as the low-income homes, are now fitted with hurricane impact-resistant windows. Because again, that was the other area. People could, a lot of people would, that's why we had the huge demands for plywood for people to board up their windows. So people would, we distribute, thousands of sheets of plywood before a major event, or an expectation of a major event. But with the advancement to us now requiring impact-resistant windows, I think those are a major stride. Because I'm a firm believer in, us building residential units that people can stay in during a storm, rather than us having to tell them to evacuate and go into some shelter. It just happens that this year we have a pandemic, which makes it even more worthwhile and more beneficial if people could stay at home. But there's no reason. When I mentioned earlier about the advances in technology and stuff, there's no reason why we can't be building homes that can, withstand Category 4, Category 5 hurricanes. It's possible. It's the practical thing to do. It doesn't require a hugely over-expensive property, regardless of what level you're looking to build at. You can build a basic, as in the case of the of the low-income homes. I mean, they're not big, they're not overly spacious, but with a good roof design, with ice and water shield and impact windows, those properties are.
I think we'll go on to the.
Huh? Hello?
Yes, you're still on. Just go ahead.
Sorry. And I mean, the other risk, of course, is that it's on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you want to get into that now or you want me to touch on that later, but I mean, I'd like to say something about that because that really, really concerns me because we're going in the opposite direction in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I think I think a little later on in the program we'll pick up on that, but I think in that cut that we just listened to, I believe there was some mention made on mosquitoes and sandflies, and we're still dealing with the mosquitoes. Anyway.
Yeah, they're still with us. This is game on.
Yeah. Anyway, we will move on. It is believed that that post the 32 hurricane, there was an attempt made to create some type of bad weather, storm, hurricane preparedness document. This was to serve us through the 40s, through the 50s, 60s, I guess, up through the mid-80s. The instructions guided the preparedness for the 44 hurricane and, of course, the ones that came up again through the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, and even through the mid-80s, when there was an initiative to create a new document was started. We listen now to a narrative from that 1983. Actually, it's a narrative from 1983 of that original standing order hurricane plan or document preparedness plan that we sort of went by, as described by the former chief secretary. And I think at that time he was also the Hurricane Standing Order Plan chairman, the late Mr. Dennis Foster, and he was speaking to Radio Cayman's news editor Joy Brandon, and this is from 82, I believe it was. I said 83, but I think it was 82. So can we have that cut up? We'll look back now at preparedness and take you back 30 years to May 1984, when our hurricane preparedness information was on a 2-page document. I think we called it back in those days full scap.
Sorry, Lachlan. It was 1 page and 2 sentences.
All right.
With a signature. I remain your obedient servant. Sorry about that.
The Chief Secretary spoke to the Cayman Islands community, and this Radio Cayman's broadcast interview with the then Radio Cayman news editor, the late Joy Brandon. The Chief Secretary in 1984 was Mr. Dennis Foster, and here he gives a brief description of hurricane preparedness standing orders.
The purpose of these orders are to make people know that the hurricane season starts June 1st and to make them be aware of what they should do in case there is a hurricane threat. These orders and the words that are sent out on the radio are not meant to frighten people, but to make them be aware in case a hurricane does threaten the island.
Now, what is the warning procedure which is taken by the government in the event of a hurricane?
Well, we are well supplied warnings, that is to say, update on weather. And generally speaking, when we see that a hurricane has made up south of Puerto Rico, we start tracking it and watching it very carefully. And the warning procedure, as laid out in the standing orders, is that phase 1, when notification is received that a hurricane is likely to strike the Cayman Islands within 48 hours, this is phase 1. Phase 2 is when notification is received that a hurricane is likely to strike the Cayman Islands within 24 hours. And phase 3 is when notification is received that a hurricane is likely to strike the Cayman Islands within 12 hours. Now, for phase 1, it's one red flag flown from the old courthouse and a new courthouse and a post office and other government buildings. And for phase 2, it's a red flag with a black square in the center from the same places. And phase 3, it's 2 red flags with black square in the center. Now, this might seem old and ancient, especially seeing that we have a radio station now, but at least it'll make them start to listen to their radio from there.
And these are the vital signals that are given. Mr. Foster, perhaps at this point you'd like to describe the characteristic of a West Indian hurricane.
Yes. Well, first of all, the season begins in June and ends in November. It's not really possible to lay down strict rules about hurricanes because they are, like women, unpredictable. But the main daily movements of a tropical hurricane have been found to be about 300 miles, although the center may be moving 12 to 15 miles per hour. The wind velocity may run as high as 150 miles an hour. West Indian hurricanes tend to travel west-northwest and may sometimes change to northeast. This very rarely happens. The destructive area of the storm may extend to a width of from 100 to 150 miles. A full hurricane may last from 12 to 36 hours. A hurricane may be accompanied by heavy rain, and experience has shown that it's impossible to keep it out of any building and that extraordinary precautions are required to keep essential articles dry. Some hurricanes are followed by very heavy rains from 2 to 3 days. Of course, the main eye of the hurricane might not stay with you too long, but it's the afterpath that really can do the damage. There often occurs a lull of about 30 minutes during a hurricane, which is accompanied by a clearing of the sky and other appearance that the hurricane is over. Such a lull is most dangerous factor in hurricane because without warning, the hurricane may recommence from a new quarter at full force. Relaxation or precautions during such a lull may lead to serious results. The biggest dangers to be expected are flying debris, that is to say like zinc sheets off of a building flying around the place, very dangerous. Loss of equipment, etc., that's insufficiently secured. Damage to stores, etc., by flooding. Damage to communications, which is almost certain to happen if we get the full blast of it, because all the poles and transformers and wires get hit down. And then, of course, flood rains. And then the most dangerous thing is the sea, because it can sort of come back or can be accompanied by a sort of tidal wave that brings very heavy seas and a very high tide that can travel up along the land a great distance.
What precautions should we take before a hurricane?
I think all during the season, people should listen to their radio. And again, I am saying we do not mean to scare our local people or even the tourists that are here. We just mean to let you know that we are in the season and we don't want you to relax in case you have to take the precautions. So keep your radio on and listen for late warnings and advisories once you have heard there's a hurricane in the Caribbean. Don't pay any attention to rumors. Rely only on the official advice and warnings heard from the radio or the media. If a hurricane is actually going to hit us, stay away from the low-lying beaches or other locations where the tides and waves and so on. In short, follow instructions given on the radio to get to the shelter. If your house is out of danger of the high tide and away from the sea and is a good strong house, well, a lot of people would want to stay there. But if you think you're not safe or your house is not safe, by all means go to one of the shelters that are provided. But if you decide to stay there, you should board up your windows or put on your storm shutters and see that the house is properly and securely fastened in case of flying debris can't break through it and so on. Getting some extra food, especially things that don't have to be cooked or refrigerated. I would suggest that every week the average person buys a couple extra tins of different things and keeps in a separate box in case you have to go to a shelter. You take your box of groceries and so on with you. If you were satisfied that you can remain where you are, you should have some sort of emergency cooking facility and don't depend on electricity. You should also provide some clean drinking water. You can stack up a lot of these empty gallon bottles full and cooking utensils and even fill your bathtub with good clean water. I think you should have a flashlight in good working condition and some spare batteries in case the electricity goes out, and check on everything that might blow away or be torn loose, garbage cans and outside furniture and any loose objects outside your buildings. Make sure that they're inside or well fastened down. If you're sure the hurricane is really going to hit us, a last minute job is to cut the heavy trees right up against your house, that in case they fall, it won't damage your house and therefore damage people inside. Be sure that a window or a door can be opened on the lee side of the house. That's the side opposite the one facing the wind. If the center or eye storm passes directly over, there will be a lull in the wind lasting from a few minutes to half of an hour or more. But stay in a safe place. Just remember, that's not a sign that it's over. Mm-hmm. It can well come back. But there again, a good little radio inside that you can keep listening to broadcasts. If we're still on the air, wouldn't hurt at all. I think the main thing about precautions to be taken is that we should all try to be calm. Your ability to meet emergencies will inspire and help others.
Where will the nerve center for the hurricane warning system, both before and after such an event, be located?
Joy, once a hurricane is 24 hours off, we set up a control room at the police headquarters, which is a very safe building. We have representatives from the various departments here with us.
Mr. Foster, what is the worst, in your estimation, that we can expect, bearing in mind all the things that have been said about 1984 as being a prime year for a hurricane?
Well, Joy, because they're making such a big thing out of it, that's the reason why I believe that we won't get anything at all. Nevertheless,
too much preparation.
We cannot get complacent about it. We just have to listen for the warnings. And as I said before, the ones that really worry us is those that make up south of Puerto Rico. Anything north generally go up into the Bahamas and hit the Florida coast or New England coast or something. But those that make up south of Puerto Rico or that are coming west, south of Puerto Rico, those are the ones we really have to watch. I think, too, that if our people listen to warnings well in time and take the action given to them, we will come out on top. We might lose some buildings, but we will not lose lives. I remember in Hurricane Allen about 3 or 4 years ago that hit the Brac pretty bad. Those people took instructions, and although there was plenty damage to electricity, telephones, roads, and buildings, not a soul got hurt. or got any injury. And I am hoping that we'll pull through another season without being hit. However, as I said, we must not get complacent, and I think that the most important thing I can say to our people are listen to the warnings and do as you're told.
Well, that was a description of the hurricane preparedness standing orders from some 37 years ago. And gentlemen, a lot of basic elements in that preparedness document, I think we still maintain today in the hazard management hurricane document. Well, a lot of information there that still pertains to today that we can still use today, and we'll come back to discuss that right after you hear these commercials.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best and sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
King Sports Center Art of Fun Summer Camp is back. From July 7th to August 7th. Now, in its 16th year, the Art of Fun Camp is ideal for kids aged 5 through 10 with activities from football, basketball, dodgeball, squash, rock climbing, arts and craft dance, singing, and more. Your child can stay cool while having fun in a safe and secure environment. For more info, email kings.brebanks@gmail.com. That's kings.brebanks@gmail.com or call 946-KING. Like King Sports Center on Facebook, and you can also find them on Instagram or call 946-5464. King Sports Center, providing you with all your fitness, recreation, and relaxation needs.
Register now for the 3rd Annual Chamber of Commerce Economic Forum, taking place online on Friday, August 14th. This year's theme, Rebuilding a Better Cayman, will tackle the effects the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the local and regional economy and how the private and public sectors can work together to create a more durable and more sustainable future. Don't miss out. Visit caymanchamber.ky to register for a full day or half day today. Corporate ticket bundles available. In partnership with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. The forum is made possible thanks to sponsors CUC, DART, Kensington Management Group, Cayman Enterprise City, and Hurley's Media.
Green Turtle. Modern solutions to get you through the new normal. Download the Green Turtle app now and top up yours or a loved one's phone with any mobile carrier in any destination. Home delivery of laptops, tablets, phones, accessories, and iTunes and major online retailer gift cards. And now, home deliveries of groceries and courier service. Guaranteed delivery within 2 hours from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit their list of products at greenturtle.ky or download the Green Turtle app today. Green Turtle is not only the future of mobile, but today it can help save a life. Take a ride on the Green Turtle Express today. Download the Green Turtle app, the future of mobile, saving lives today.
Wow, looks good. What is that?
Chicken share.
What did you just say to me?
Chicken share.
I am not a chicken
Whoa! I said chicken share. It's from KFC. Bucket of 12 hot wings, 6 pieces of chicken, or 8 tenders. KFC chicken share. Just $12 each.
Oh.
Want some chicken, tenders, or hot wings?
You're sharing your chicken share with me?
The new chicken share from KFC, just $12 each, and it's finger-licking good. Dine at KFC Baytown Plaza, KFC Shedden Road, or KFC at the Strand.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
And gentlemen, that old standing order hurricane plan really served us well, I think, through the years, up through the mid-80s when that new plan came into business. But I think a lot of what was in that is still applicable for today. Comments?
No, Ms. Luxter, perhaps if I could ask of you, I mean, thinking back to the benefit of Mr. Sambula and Mr. Ebanks on air, but Simon, with looking at technology today, utilization, even the preparation, dissemination of plans. Back then, Mr. Loxley referenced, foloscope. You take the paper, the drum, and you photocopy it, and just physically getting the plan in the hands of, that group of people that needed it. Now we put it in a word processor or some other kind of electronically, zip it off in an email, and it's gone to everybody instantaneously. How do we make sure that dissemination and the immediacy of it, coupled with the planning and the physical interaction? HMCI today versus the National Hurricane Committee back then versus whatever we did, prior to the preparation of the 4-4 and even Hurricane Allen.
It's an interesting question, and I think we're looking at it now a lot too. I think there's a very good foundation laid down with the full council, and having every single government department involved. I think it's important for us to push a little bit harder. For instance, telecommunications are vulnerable. Who's checking to make sure that those submarine cables are still in good condition after 20 years? What are we doing to increase resilience every single year? Are we identifying what the vulnerabilities are in each different aspect? So I made the example of telecommunications. We've become so dependent on internet. What can we do? Have we identified where our weaknesses are? And are we working each year to try to, based on the experiences, say we do get hit by a hurricane, are we building those lessons into the updated plan? Is it a dust collector, or is it actually making a difference? And I think, sometimes there's something to be said for a fairly simple, short couple of pages, but I think, our economy is getting quite complex. There's quite a lot of people. Lots of people in Cayman now. I think the emergency support team system, used to be the subcommittees, is an effective way of looking at our response. But I think we've needed to build in resilience to make sure that our government, for instance, as well, continues to operate. And I think I'd like to see, a bit more. We're seeing more work done now on the continuity of operations plans to make sure that government is resilient and that we continue to operate and function. So our plans are growing, but I think the plans are very important. I think I'm going to let Mr. Loxley jump back in. Sorry, I'm sort of a bit waffly on that one.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned technology, and I think there should be a concern of too much reliance on technology, simply because technology is very fickle, and with a big wind, you get a great deal of that.
You have a big appreciation for radio after the power goes out and the internet goes out and everything.
Knocked out. So I wonder if Donnie or Sam got any thoughts on that.
Let me go first, because I know Mr. Ebanks has a lot to say about that. we often spoke about that. As far as let me back up a little to the hurricane plan that Mr. Foster was talking about. That was a very good forerunner for what we then improved on, right? That was a very good forerunner. It had basically nearly all the parts, and we improved on it. But it was a very good plan. Now, talking about what happens if we lose power and we lose communication, because that is all what the communications we have depends upon, and it goes back to when Hurricane Gilbert was approaching Cayman Islands. It knocked out communications from Jamaica, which was responsible for us at that time. We got all our warnings and everything from Jamaica, and Jamaica went down. We had to depend on ourselves, right? So from that, we decided we had to work our way up and get our own forecast office. But we still have the thing about people relying on the internet. Yes, that is good. But when power goes down, what do we have? We have only the Weather Service you can turn to for information. And that is why I'm so glad we now have a radar with which we can track the system ourselves. And we get information for ourselves, and now we pass information to the Hurricane Center if anything happens. So one thing I must say, we have to encourage people, if possible, to have a power source in their homes, and the government institutions responsible for warnings and so forth should not be without a backup generator. That is very important. So that is all I have to say for now. There's a lot more I can say, but I'll leave it for Mr. Ebanks to come in and say what he has to say.
Donnie?
Roughly, I'm going to, I need to hang up on this line because I'm losing my power. I'm going to call you back on another line.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, we'll move on until Donnie rejoins us, but I think what Mr. Sambulo was referring to, it's important, and I know, and he kind of jumped a little bit ahead of where we're at, but we're coming up to that new plan, or let's say the plan that the Hurricane National Committee plan that preceded what hazard management got. Looking at the time here, I believe that we can move on and get that cut up, Susan. And but first, let me just remind the folks that this Talk Today, Radio Cayman special presentation on preparedness methods of preparing for storms, bad weather, hurricanes, is being brought to you by Parsons Air Conditioning, Refrigeration and Appliances, and by the Ministry of Health, Sports, Youth and Culture. And so we'll go. Just let me set this one up. We're going to listen now to former National Hurricane Committee Preparedness Plan Coordinator and Fire Chief, the late Kirkland Nixon, speaking about the new plan, and that was the one that was started in 1984.
I've been in government from 1966, so I am quite aware of what Mr. Foster was talking about. But I think it was in 1984 that what caused a lot of apprehension and concern in the Caribbean was that the donor nations, USAID, the UDP, and all the other European donors got fed up with the Caribbean and our preparedness MO that we had, because they were pumping money into the Caribbean to help disaster preparedness, and of course it was disappearing, and it was going to build play fields and all sorts of things. And I think Governor Scott came around that time, and pressure was put on us to do something. And I remember Mr. Foster sending Deputy Commissioner Archer and myself to St. Lucia to a conference that included the entire Caribbean basin and all the representatives from French-speaking, Dutch, English, the whole of us, and they put us in a resort for a week, and they drilled into us, go home and fix this. And that was the start of a disaster preparedness regime in the Caribbean. They also started the Pan-Caribbean Disaster Development Project, and Cayman being a member, and Deputy Commissioner Archer and I represented Cayman on that for a couple of years, and that's how we started, or I got involved in writing being the, as I should put it, the anchor point for the writing of Cayman's disaster preparedness plan. You know, over the years, it has grown. We have learned a lot. People like Fred came on board. You know, he's a scientist. He he started to explain to us the science behind weather and this and that and the other. And Fred, I believe that's how it grew. I must tell you, there were a lot of challenges along the way. One of the biggest problems we had is trying to convince government to use Cayman Airways to evacuate. I remember Sheldon Hislop and myself going to cabinet to try to explain to them the rationale for evacuating tourists and being asked to leave the room. You guys are talking nonsense, you know, and we persisted. And I think eventually we had a one-on-one with Tom Jefferson and trying to explain the economics to him. We said, well, you're not flying the planes empty, you know. Everybody has a ticket, so it can pay for itself. You know, we're not asking you to fly the plane for free. And he finally got it, and that's how we started to evacuate passengers from Cayman. And today is part of the plan. It works. But there's a lot of history behind this, and we learned a lot over those years. But I do think, with respect, we have a hell of a long way to go. Yeah. We will get to that, right?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. You know, thinking back, 1984, the population was what, maybe 18,000?
About that, right. Yeah. And the tourists on the island probably what, about 3,000-4,000? 2,000, yeah.
So even back then, I mean, there were folks there who recognized the importance of really being prepared, and that's what I think has moved us forward. And right now, I believe that, well, I know some years back, the Cayman Islands hurricane preparedness document was the flagship of the whole Caribbean. They took keys from us.
Actually, we were very proud that the United Nations adopted our plan as a model. And I must say that credit goes to the entire public service for that, because I think what he was saying is there's volume, so that the fire service has a section, police has a section, weather has a section, and everybody sort of wrote their own response, you know. Yeah, it's a good plan.
Now, and you just made reference to, you know, some of the improvements that we really need to make in short order in order to keep up with, because if the improvements are not made and the population increases, tourism increases, we're on a sliding scale backwards, really. And one of the elements, Mr. Eubanks, one of the elements I believe I know that is constant in this, that keeps us from moving forward at the pace that we want, is funding. And maybe you can speak a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, also, as far as I'm concerned, funding always comes down to what do you make your priorities. I mean, certainly our experience in dealing with hurricanes is that you have people turn up in expensive cars saying they need 2 sheets of plywood. At the personal level, people making poor decisions about what their priorities are for funding and not focusing on mitigation or prevention. They could have afforded those 2 sheets of plywood. And I think that, you know, when you see that then translate to the national level, there are always demands for funding. But when you look at the potential, you know, the risk that you're playing with, the losses you could incur, or the damage you could incur, I don't think funding is really the Achilles of us here in Cayman. I mean, I think it comes down to will and determination.
Priorities,
yeah. I mean, that's why we've we've gotten better responses in periods after we've been impacted. When we were impacted by Gilbert, we got some traction and we were able to do some things. And we saw some things happen post Ivan. Unfortunately, I don't think we saw as much happen institutional and legislatively as we should have seen happen. I think there's been any substantial changes in our planning legislation or building requirements. Some of that perhaps has to do with the fact that we continue to be very much on a development diet. We believe it's development that must fund our needs, and it's not obviously in that same area that the discipline needs to be applied. But we'll talk a little bit more. I'd like to talk a little bit more later on about some of the fundamental things that we need to be doing going forward.
Okay.
And also could we add that that Ivan is not the nightmare scenario that we talked about. And like Mr. Foster was saying, we don't want to frighten the population. But I think we need to make them aware that Fred can talk and John can talk about it, the nightmare scenario that we always feared that could occur with Cayman, with a storm like Ivan or Mitch, if it's tracking in a certain direction, it could cripple this economy for ages to come. I mean, I don't know if you want to get into that.
Well, I think we need to mention it because there's nothing better than sensitizing the public, and we've got upward of 60,000 people here now who have never, and even we here can't comprehend the whole picture. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of meat in that to be considered, and that was back from around the Ivan experience, and we're 8 years, 15, almost 15 years forward. Fred, you got any comments here? We got about 2 minutes to get a few words in, and then we got to go to the news, but we can come back and probably just touch on this after that.
All I have to say is everything we said there was right then, and it's right now. It's okay too, and we have to keep pushing that message that we have to build on what we have experienced and build on what we have. Yeah.
Donnie?
Yeah, kind of rough to listen to my old friend.
Yes, I know. All of us.
No, you talk about technology being fickle, and one thing he wasn't was fickle. You know, he was the battery. He was the energizer. He was the driver of a lot of what we did, or about all of what we did back then. Maybe after the break, I'll weigh in a bit more.
Okay. And we're coming up now to just about news time, and Susan, I'm sure, will plug that in for us right now.
Your 2 p.m. headlines brought to you by GreenTurtle.ky. Take a ride on the Green Turtle Express today. Download the Green Turtle app, the future of mobile, saving lives today.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have here on the island.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. Governor Martin Roper announces that domestic partnerships will become law by September. Mr. Roper says the Cayman Islands Court of Appeal was clear that Cayman is in breach of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution and the European Convention on Human Rights. In international news, Facebook and Twitter have penalized Donald Trump and his campaign for posts in which the president claimed children were almost immune to coronavirus. Facebook deleted the post, saying it contained harmful COVID misinformation. Twitter followed by saying it had frozen a Trump campaign account until a tweet of the same clip was removed. Tens of millions of people in the Philippines are back in lockdown after doctors warned a surge in new coronavirus cases could push the healthcare system to collapse. Stay-at-home orders are now in place in Manila and 4 surrounding provinces on the island of Luzon for 2 weeks. The country only just emerged from one of the strictest lockdowns in June. The BBC has received more than 18,600 complaints about the use of a racial slur in a TV's news report. The N-word was used in a report about a racially aggravated attack in Bristol, broadcast by Points West and the BBC News Channel last week. The corporation has since defended the use of the word but accepted it caused offense. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
Your 2 p.m. headlines brought to you by GreenTurtle.ky. Take a ride on the Green Turtle Express today. Download the Green Turtle app, the future of mobile, saving lives today.
Green Turtle, modern solutions to get you through the new normal. Download the Green Turtle app now and top up yours or a loved one's phone with any mobile carrier in any destination. Home delivery of laptops, tablets, phones, accessories, and iTunes and major online retailer gift cards. And now, home deliveries of groceries and courier service. Guaranteed delivery within 2 hours from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit their list of products at greenturtle.ky or download the Green Turtle app today. Green Turtle is not only the future of mobile, but today it can help save a life. Take a ride on the Green Turtle Express today. Download the Green Turtle app, the future of mobile, saving lives today.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio K-Man on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio K-Man app or log on to our website, radiokman.gov.ky.
your voice, your choice, your radio.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best in sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
This is an important announcement from Customs and Border Control. Due to a record number of imported goods and the potential for inclement weather due to hurricane season, customers are required to collect their packages as soon as possible. If you are using an agent to clear your goods, please ensure that you have completed the appointment of agent form and send it to your agent 48 hours prior to your goods arriving. For persons self-clearing goods, it will be necessary for you to log in to CBC's online portal by visiting www.cbc.gov.ky and register at least 48 hours before your shipment arrives.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
And we'll pick up right where we left off there. And Donnie, you like to pipe in here?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. Let me just first qualify something I said earlier in talking about the advent of us requiring ice and water shield and requiring these impact windows. I mean, as I understand it, both of those have probably come online within the last 5 years. And I didn't want to give the impression when I referred to residential units, and I specifically referred to what we call that, the high density or low income units, that all of those units currently have those two features. So, if any homeowner was listening to me, I certainly would want them to be conscious and make themselves conscious of whether their windows, if they bought their house 6-8 years ago, they need to be conscious of whether they have those or not. So I didn't want to give that false impression that they all do. I noticed in that clip that you just aired there, that I think I made reference to the term everything being development driven, and I think, I don't know, it's probably fair to say that we've become development addicted, it seems to me. There's a classic example on the South Side Island, and what we generally refer to as Spot Street, just east of Ocean Club. A development called South Shore Apartments went in a couple of years after I-1, and it was built elevated with the ground floor unit, or probably 4 or 5 feet above the ground. Unfortunately, that didn't become the norm. I mean, we have extensive development taking place along the south coast. The same coast that took the most severe battering from Ivan, and would take the most severe battering from any system passing on the south side of it. There's 2 or 3 projects going on right now in the Grand Harbor area. And if anyone pulls up a Google map and looks There's a residential development directly across from Shelcock Drive that was there before Ivan that had left a nice 20, 30-foot strip of mangrove and set back with landscaping behind that. And one would have thought that after our Ivan experience, that would have been the norm. But you look at the project that's now going in adjacent to it directly across from Peanut. You look at the one that's going in across from the roundabout, and there's no mangrove left. Everything has been filled out to the water and probably pushed into the water. And what Fred was talking about is, destroying mangroves and not appreciating their benefit is true. I mean, we just seem to be totally obsessed with getting rid of them and thinking that they're just of no value. And I don't think either of these projects are in it. I mean, you see various houses going in down along Southtown Road. I haven't seen any of them built elevated from the ground so that water can pass underneath them in the event of a major storm.
And you think back, Donnie, that was almost a standard operating procedure in building, was to get that floor, 18 inches, 30 inches, 36 inches off the ground many years ago.
And that's why I mentioned this development called South Shore.
Yes, I'm familiar with it. Yeah,
done about 2006.
Yes, yeah.
But of course, you see, I mean, while Captain Keith talked about him taking 10 years to recover in the back, and we bounced back fairly quickly from Ivan because our societies are now evolved into where we have this anesthesia called property insurance. And property insurance has the benefit, yes, that it allows you to rebound more quickly when you're damaged. But it's the property insurance and the lack of any restrictions on people accessing it that humors this ground-level development in coastal areas and the creation of these extremely expensive risks. A lot of this property, I mean, the property, the development I referred to in the Grand Harbor, Peanuts area, those are properties that sat there for hundreds of years. And Caymanians didn't build on them because they were too low.
That's correct. Yep.
Because they had to save their money to build. Nowadays, we borrow money. We take our property insurance and we build in places that at levels that we just shouldn't be building at. And if people want to build there, then, they should be paying at a substantially higher premium or not be eligible to participate in the local market, insurance market at all. Because the people who build homes away from the water, like I do in Savannah or other people do in Northwood or in other areas, and don't incur any damage in a hurricane, end up having to contribute to the overall increases in insurance rates for the companies to meet these kind of risks. I mean, so while we've done such, great things in terms of, I mentioned earlier, the roof coverings and the resilience of the hardness of the openings, the windows and doors, this is the area that unfortunately still is way behind what it should be.
Fred?
Development, requiring people to elevate, and also their eligibility for property insurance.
Right. Fred, you got 10 seconds you want to put in there?
Yes, I'll put my 10 seconds. But I agree with everything Mr. Ebanks says, and I felt that way about clearing the mangroves for a long time. And that is going to come back to haunt this island if we don't find some kind of some way to arrest that.
Yeah. Looking back over the years, you'll see that our forefathers, even though they didn't have all this technology to go with, but the good common sense of recognizing that 1981 position that we're sitting in, and we're not going to be moving from that, but knowing where we're at and taking cognizance of the risk of that, they served us well. They didn't have glass windows, and looking back, when I think glass windows did come into to the building in Cayman, which was way back, but they had sturdy wooden shutters to close against those glass windows. I don't know, Donnie, if you remember that. Maybe your parents had those shutters on glass windows, if you had glass windows.
I mean, look, the reality is that you can get 3 or 4 sheets of 5/8 ply and make shutters for your house for a couple of $100. And they last for, if you store them properly, they last for years and years and years. And, it's just a basic thing that we need to be encouraging people to make their properties more resilient, because, I don't believe that the push needs to be to build more and more shelters so people can get out of their house and go to a shelter and go back to their house to find that, the windows are blown out, the roof coverings are blown off, and now they can't live in their house. Yeah. Those are things that don't need to be happening in 2020.
Yeah, and there needs to be more attention paid in that direction. Well, we're moving right along here. Sterling, you got 10 seconds you want to poke in?
I would, but let's, interest of time, let's get to the historical accounts.
Yeah, okay. And Donnie, I think we've got Kirk for a few seconds on this next cut also. And we now move to a narrative and this was post-Gilbert, a regional conference in Jamaica, I think is where it happened, talking about hurricane preparedness. And the officials there speaking about some of the main disruptive elements to come out of a Hurricane Gilbert or something of that nature experience.
The problem we had with the press of not being able to get our view across, on the position of the various countries in regards to the damage that had occurred, rather than the press adopting their own interpretation of what had happened.
Amateur radio operator originating out of the U.S. who happened to be in Montego Bay, whose voice was carried by CNN for several hours on the day of the hurricane, giving highly erroneous information. We urge that the news services try to verify this kind of information. Simply because the gentleman had the right accent does not mean he understands what is happening. And it is very damaging when your tourist industry is assumed to be in pieces. I think the words he used were that the hotel he was in was peeling apart like a banana. In fact, the hotel is still standing. It had minor damage, and by the following day it became a refuge for the people who lived in the surrounding houses. The question of the damage to the Jamaican tourist industry because of pure news reporting rather than physical damage is one which should be carefully explored. The second question of the damage done to Cayman's tourist industry, which had almost no physical damage, simply because people assume that Jamaica was devastated, Cayman also was.
Our people responded very positively to the instructions given. Secondly, after the hurricane passed, I think that the self-reliance that is ingrained in the average Caymanian came into play, and they went about business as usual, doing things without outside assistance, because we've been used to doing this for so long. It just came naturally, and this was a very important aspect of the recovery after the hurricane, because I think that there was much more damage than has been sort of alluded to. But we took care of it ourselves, and then, the international agencies paid no attention to that part of it.
You heard reference there being made to fake news and the press and all of this kind of stuff, and you just think of, with all of the social media communications, how that could translate today. I remember, in fact, I spoke with Mr. Norman Bodden just yesterday about this, that the reports that were happening in the foreign press, more or less, when they had actually sort of lumped Cayman with Jamaica, because Jamaica took a pretty good slam. Everybody was thinking that Cayman was almost washed away. And I think we got Doran, our news editor at the time. We got him to go up to Miami with Mr. Norman Borden, and with some connections that we had, we made, and we did a sort of blitz up there and got things straightened out pretty quick. But it was, these are some of the perils that we're up against, and I'm not sure that, or I hope, let's put it that way, that cognizance is being taken of that, because I think one of the reporters that actually they flew in here, came on right after, I think this was during Gilbert though, after Gilbert, on a private plane, and wanted to run around, and we had to corral him up at the fire station there. But the reporter is still out there on the land reporting. He was working for CBS at the time. I think now he maybe could be CNN. But Zarilla was his name, and you'll see him pop up there. But I think Mr. Norman and Doran brought him into some of the communications, and actually got him to admit, we really flubbed it here as far as the press on Cayman.
Yes, that speaks to the whole issue of when we talk about independence, people don't see it as political. They recognize financial, but are they also looking at the importance of being able to communicate? Redundancy and resilience in systems are important. Continuity in business planning, but also the whole consciousness of the populace's ability to respond to certain things, so that messaging get out, not fake news and not propaganda, but the whole this gives us a perspective now, I think, Mr. Banks, especially in this era.
Yes, and you heard mention made of we call them CBers or
the hams.
The hams, and while they can really serve a very important way, they sometimes can really put you under the water. If they're not guided in the proper way. And Donnie or Sam, you got 10-15 seconds on that, or?
Well, I think we've been fortunate. We have and Fred can correct me if I'm wrong, but my experience up until I left there was that, we had a very good relationship with National Hurricane Center, which is the premier and source of weather information for this area. Our guys communicated well with them, they communicated well with us. Unfortunately, there are people who, still have a preference to listen to information coming out of an overseas source, a U.S. source, such as Weather Channel, as compared to listening to a weather announcement coming from National Weather Service and Red Hill and Radio Cayman. And that's something that we can only try to keep educating people. That you're not going to get information from someone like the Weather Channel that's more relevant to Cayman than you're going to get from your National Weather Service here. But that's just an ongoing battle to try to educate people. Weather information, as I understand, is updated 4 times a day at 6-hour intervals. I got up in the mornings just before 4 o'clock to hear 4 o'clock information and call Kirkland at 4:30 and decide what we're going to do next. Right?
That's right.
But you can get up at 8 o'clock and listen to the Weather Channel and think you're getting up to the minute information. Well, it's the information that they got at 4 o'clock. They're now giving it to you, but so that's part of what we contend with.
Sam?
But, I think we're fortunate to have a really good cadre of guys that we've developed there in Johnson and Mentine, and we need to listen to what they have to tell us when these systems threaten us.
Yeah, well, yes, that is one thing I need to comment about too, and Mr. Ebanks hit it on the head. Nobody else but the Hurricane Center puts out watches and warnings. Weather Channel and everybody else get their weather from the Hurricane Center in Miami, as do all the international services in this area. The World Meteorological Organization has it that the Hurricane Center is the main body from which information flows. And every meteorological service is connected to the National Hurricane Center. And we get the latest information. What the television stations do, they take the information, they pretty it up, and they put it out. And some people believe that they are more accurate than the local weather service. Well, I'll tell you one thing. The local weather service here has all the tools and the knowledge. And we have had that for a little while now. Right. We have radar that is useful for us when the hurricane approaches us. The Hurricane Center starts to get information from us, right? And we send them information about the hurricanes. They put it into their models, they put it into their messages, right? And they broadcast it. So I see a lot of people running around, oh, I got it from this website, I got it from this website, that doesn't really matter. You must listen, everybody in the Cayman Islands, listen to the National Weather Service. People will put out all kind of things because we have information out there. But nothing beats the local information because you get the information and you tailor it to the local landscape of the country. The weather channel. Yeah.
Alerts, warnings,
yes.
warnings are all issued through the National Hurricane Center, but in consultation with us.
That's right.
We make the decisions here. Yes, we're going to go to a warning at 4 o'clock, and Hurricane Center will include it in their 4 o'clock advisory.
That's right.
But they don't make those decisions. Nobody else makes those decisions for Cayman.
Right. That is so true. And that is one of the things I was coming to that when it comes to warnings, watches, alerts, we produce that ourselves in conjunction with the National Hurricane Committee. Nobody else does that. So we get the information and we tailor it for the Cayman Islands.
Okay, I think that's well said. And I believe we got John, the current Director General, John Tibbetts, on the line, and he can just fill us in with a minute and a half of information there, and we'll move on to the next segment. It looks like we're going to have to run a little bit over time, but I think this is all important information to get into the public. John, you're there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me good?
Yeah, we can hear you.
It's good to have the old crew back together again.
Yeah. Well, you'll hear a bit more of them in the next cut there, which we got coming up in about 2 minutes. So, you want to pipe in on anything that you've heard us talking about here?
Well, I just got just a few little small concerns, to be honest with you, and that is I know you were talking about media giving information out there, and it's the wrong time and what have you. And sometimes you get a 4 a.m. bulletin, and you got a 10 a.m. that comes and updates things, and they're still looking at the 4 a.m. And if they're not careful about how they post it to places like Facebook and to various forms of the media, it can be quite misleading to the public. Another little pet peeve of mine basically is that when things aren't labeled correctly. Are you talking about a Hurricane Center forecast track, or are you talking about a weather model? Because I've seen people come in and crying out, people, and say, listen, the Hurricane Center says the hurricane's coming across the Cayman Islands. And I'm looking at saying, what in the world are you talking about? No, it's some weather model that is way off sync with the general thinking of the Hurricane Center. So we need to be very careful about some of this kind of information that's being passed out there to the public.
I think thus the importance of paying attention to the local media, what the local weather service is putting out, and Radio Cayman is very diligent in getting that out on time and repeating it and keeping in touch with the Weather Service to make sure that we're getting the correct information out. So it's so important that residents listen to the local information. Not to say to discard what you're hearing all together, but the local information is the information that will guide you more correctly. And as I said, I think we're going to have to run a little overtime, but it's information I think that's really critical to us being properly prepared. So Sue, if we can bring up that next insert, and we'll just give you a little thing. We'll hear the final edited narrative on the eve before Ivan and Donnie and Sam, and I believe Kirk's voice is in this one too, and what the National Hurricane Plan officials thought about this monster hurricane heading towards us. And this is from Ivan's 10th anniversary discussion. So, Sue, if you could bring that insert up. Welcome now to CI Retro. This afternoon we'll look back to 10 years ago to the day, that Saturday afternoon, and all the folks around the table here will certainly remember that Saturday afternoon when a monster hurricane, Ivan, was about to approach. We'll look at lesson learned, present and future perspectives. And in the studio with us we have Mr. Donovan E. Banks, former Deputy Governor and Deputy Chairman of the National Hurricane Committee, to join us. Welcome, Donnie.
Well, thank you, Loxley. Pleasure to be here. See familiar faces.
Yeah, it looks like that Saturday afternoon, don't it?
It certainly does.
And Mr. Kirkland Nixon, former National Hurricane Committee Coordinator, and at the time, Fire Service Chief, and I think almost out again. Kirk, welcome.
Welcome, Doctor. Glad to be here. It seems like old times, all right.
Just about,
Yeah.
Old times. And also we have with us the former Director General of the Weather Service, Mr. Fred Sambula. Fred?
Thank you, Loxley. Good evening, everyone. This is I don't like to bring back these memories, but it pays to keep reminding people that they're not totally safe. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think it's, just looking back and being involved in a little bit of some of the observances that's gone on all week long, I think it's a really stern reminder of us of really where we sit and what we have to be aware of. And also, John Tibbetts sneaked in here. I didn't even see him. And he's the present Director General of the Weather Service. John, welcome.
My apologies for being late. Good afternoon, Loxley and everyone else. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to the conversation.
Okay, and last but not least, Mr. Lee Madison, and he is the Deputy Director of Hazard Management, Operations and Communications. Lee, welcome.
Thank you, Loxley. It's a pleasure to be here, and it is like a reunion almost.
Yes, that's for sure. All right, gentlemen, let's think back to Saturday afternoon, 10 years ago, actually, to the day. The date is a little bit off, but to the day. Can you just give us, let's say, a 47-second capsule of your thoughts, where you were at on that day? Let's see. Ebanks, you want to start? Everybody's smiling, but...
Loxley, I guess by this time afternoon, soon after this, I was at the fire station. We certainly had all the warning we needed. We'd watched the system for a week. We'd issued an alert, which we don't normally do, 3 days before. The system had actually slowed a bit, as I recall, in the previous 12 to 18 hours. Our window of preparation had gotten a bit wider than we had hoped. And the opportunities had been there to do the things that we needed to do. And I guess there was certainly an air of confidence that we'd done all we could. But in hindsight, we say that obviously that confidence didn't,
didn't factor in the
didn't take in. Yeah, I mean, simply just couldn't take in the severity of what we were going to encounter because we just didn't have that in our imagination. So, but I mean, that's basically where we were at. Yeah, I mean, we felt we got done what we needed to get done, and we could deal with it.
Fred, I know you were deep in in thought as everybody else was.
Yes, Loxley, but it was one heck of a hurricane. And I saw it on the charts. We knew it was coming directly for us. And I was praying at the same time that people would heed the warning. But, nobody had ever experienced a monster of that size and ferocity. We were really, I was a bit worried because then I had to leave my family and go to the fire station. And I know that the storm was going to be severe. But what we didn't really expect to happen was for it to sit around for such a long time. And in speaking to my friends at the Hurricane Center, Max Mayfield at that time was the director of the Hurricane Center. He said, God, help those people in the Cayman Islands because this is going to be really bad for them. And nobody really could have thought up front that a storm so severe would come and literally park by Cayman's Gate for such a long time. And that was what was worrying to me. I even looked at Mr. Nixon and told him, boy, this no good. You will find, I feel tomorrow you'll find some dead people. Yeah. But luckily, it wasn't as bad as I thought in terms of loss of life.
John, you were assisting Sam with all the information and...
Yeah, I think I ended up in the fire station as well. I think I had a slight advantage over Mr. Sambo in the sense that I actually ended up having my entire family there with me. So that was a degree of comfort for me, and it allowed me to perform my job to the best of my abilities. I think we've all had storms of various categories have gone across the Cayman Islands over the years, but we've never had a monster of this caliber. And I think rather than the storm catching anybody by surprise, I think it's the ferocity of the storm, the strength of that storm. We saw places damaged and flooded and all kind of things that we had never seen in our lifetime. We would have felt comfortable in boarding up our homes to a certain level, and this storm really just took everything and just blew it out of the water. I remember after the storm, Mr. Sambol and I are taking a tour down along the seaside, seeing some of the damage and what have you, and one of the apartment complexes was basically out by the seaside, had built a 6-inch seawall made out of 6-inch blocks and filled it in. Needless to say, after the hurricane, those 6-inch blocks were sitting down in the sitting room. What you in fact did was not protect yourself, but you gave the hurricane extra weapons to deal with. So I think the standard, the level of the storm is what really scared everybody and really just blew everybody away.
Mr. Nixon?
Yeah, well, my job was sort of to think the unthinkable. And I must say that I had a lot of dread and apprehension after talking to Fred about the consequences of the impact of such a hurricane. And I had the job of trying to brief my staff to prepare them for the worst. They were out on the road all day. We checked all the homes on the coast. We made sure that everybody was aware of the threat, even to the extent that we had to get the police to forcefully get people out of some of the homes because they weren't taking the warning seriously. And I must say that having observed hurricanes for many years before Ivan, and I was just thinking about Hurricane Mitch and the destruction that it did to Honduras and realizing, Fred, that came within 180 miles of us.
About 200 miles or so.
And even at that distance, we had severe wave action on the south coast. I can't say that I was surprised by the damage. I was a bit relieved afterwards because Sister Conley can tell you our conversation before and after the storm was really about where were we going to put the bodies, actually, if you want to know the truth. And when it dawned on us that we had escaped that scenario, I must tell you that I was relieved. The other stuff, the recovery, the cleanup, all that to me is, I guess, par the course. Disaster preparedness is about saving lives. And I think that Cayman was fortunate. We were lucky that people paid attention. They got off the low-lying areas, got into shelters, and all in all, I think we did fairly well, and we should thank God. I'm not sure if the same thing will happen again if we get a repeat, to be quite honest with you.
And Kirk, you mentioned thanking God, and I think a lot of that went on right after it. And just in keeping, tomorrow evening at 2 o'clock on the waterfront, Full Gospel Hall, Church of God, at 2 o'clock, they're having a special praise service in observance of Ivan's 10th anniversary. Lee, give us your 47-second thoughts.
I think I was very naive. I told my father when he rang me from Australia that I said, there'll be a couple of trees down and we'll lose power for a few days. And he had a friend contact me and he said he was very concerned because I was being very blasé about the whole thing. And I wasn't being blasé, I was just a little naive about the whole thing. And I told him, well, I'm going to be in a safe place. I'm going to be where the governor is. And that was also not right either. That wasn't the best place we could be in. But I had my family with me, so that was all right. And, I think the aftermath, I was surprised. I was surprised my house had flooded. Not very badly, but I was quite surprised. I was at the top of the hill, and I thought of the people at the bottom of the hill must be a lot worse than me. But yeah, we got through it and survived, so that was the main thing.
Yes, fellas, well, there's so much information in that we could probably spend another program just discussing what that, and that was some of the thoughts of on the eve of Ivan coming down on us, and even those in that fire station that afternoon, even having experiences from way back, could not have comprehended or thought what we were in for that night and through the next day. Donnie or Fred, you want to pipe in there for a little bit?
Right, go ahead.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Ebanks.
Well, no, I mean, that was obviously, I guess we want to say a mind-altering experience. I mean, we had no idea of what we were about to face. But the fact that we got through it as we did, I think, is a testament to the work that people had put in. Prior to that, I mean, Kirkland certainly drove us to capitalize as much as we could on the Gilbert scare from 1988. We'd made, some significant progress. We've done quite a bit of work. And this system, while it was huge and all that, it did give us a lot of warning. We did take it seriously from early on, and the community, I think, responded well. I mean, and we're fortunate to have gotten through with just the two unfortunate accidental deaths or whatever they were classified as that we had. So, But we don't know what the next one will be, what direction it will come from, and I just think there's still work for us to do.
Fred?
Yes, I think that really the improvements in the hurricane plan came to the fore there. It worked out quite well. Like Mr. Ebanks said, we have a lot of work still to do. And these things you can never finish the amount of work you have. But I think the response in Hurricane Ivan was pretty good, right? And the only thing I'd like to see from that experience really is to get a good Met Office where the equipment and the personnel will be able to work from and they're safe, because the office right now is below standards for an emergency. So that is what I would like the government to do, to clearly think about housing the Met Service in a building where it is safe and work can continue. So I think the response was good in Ivan. We learned a lot from it, and we have a lot more things that we can implement based on the experience.
And I think also cognizant in all of our consciousness should be that, Ivan was a real experience for us to learn from, but that is not really the biggest system that could ever affect us. And we have to think of something maybe another magnitude past Ivan. And I think John is still on the line with us. And Sam, you want to just weigh in just a few seconds on that, and then John, you come in.
I have to say something about that. Mr. Nixon mentioned that we could be much worse. We could have been much worse off after Ivan, because had Ivan shifted a little more to the north of its track, it would have come directly over the Cayman Islands, and I don't know if the level of destruction would be the same as it was when Ivan passed to the south of us by 20 miles. If it had come a little further up, we would get stronger winds, we would get a lot more damage, and probably more people die. But this is where I say thanks to the good Lord. He looked after us. But it is not the worst we could have gotten. When I told Mr. Nixon that at the time, man, he told me, you're talking a bunch of foolishness. Nothing worse than that. I say, my body just be thankful that it passed south of us. Yeah. So anyway, that is all I have to say about that right now.
Okay, well let's get John in there and get a few comments from him on this the potential of something even bigger than Ivan.
Well, in the great wise words of my former boss, Mr. Sambula, it's not an if, it's a when. And I think he was talking about when Cayman would get impacted by a Category 5 hurricane or something worse. We've seen hurricanes much more powerful than Ivan was. You want another blessing? After Hurricane Ivan had just passed Jamaica, it started to go through what we call eye wall replacement cycle. And so the storm was not at the strength it was when it passed just after it passed Jamaica. So it weakened a bit over our area. So what happens if that eye wall replacement cycle doesn't occur? You're probably looking at another 10 miles per hour wind speed. As Fred says, if the storm comes a bit further to the north, then the eye and the worst of the storm surge basically comes right over the Georgetown area. What if the storm was moving a bit slower? all these things can cause this storm, any storm that is going to impact the Cayman Islands, to be so much worse than what you have.
Yeah, well, I think, we have to be very cognizant of all of those aspects that I think have come out in the previous 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 3/4, or 2.5 hours that we have been on the air talking about hurricane preparedness and what we need to do. And I think the vigilance that we need to practice and really keep up front, and the information and the education that needs to go out to the general public, because I think I heard it mentioned recently that we probably think we still got something in the neighborhood of 55,000 to 60,000 people around here, and probably 60 to 70% of them have never experienced anything like that. And I think the more information that we can get out there from and sensitizing them to these type of things, will give us more of an advantage in surviving it. And gentlemen, we're kind of running out of time here. Donnie and Sam and John, we want to thank you all for taking time out to participate with us on this program this afternoon. I'm sure the listening public should be a bit more sensitized as to where we sit, the potential that there could be, and we cannot discount it, because as I think John repeated just a little bit ago, and Sam over the years has kept telling us, it's not a matter of if the possibility exists that we could be impacted by a huge, huge, huge system. It's just a matter of when, and we don't know when that when is. And so, gentlemen, again, thanks a lot. Unless you got 5 seconds you want to pipe in here before we close out?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly give a shout out to Donna Coleman and Simon and all the others at HMCI for the work that they're doing. I'm trying to, continue to move us along. As we've seen, obviously, our risks aren't limited to hurricanes. And I just expect that they will continue to receive the support from the public service, which was one of the things that energized me when I was there. I mean, you summoned an NAC meeting, and everybody that was supposed to be there turned up. I mean, that was the level of commitment. And I just expect that continues, and I want to wish them well and all that they're trying to do for the entire community. Thank you very much.
Okay. Fred, any final?
I'll echo the sentiments that Mr. Ebans said just now. And I also would like to remind the later people of the Cayman Islands, or the new people who have come in the island from places that don't experience hurricanes, that a hurricane is no joke, and they must not take it as a simple storm like we have in the mid-latitudes. This is a serious business, and they must be prepared at all times. Thank you.
John?
Just wanted to just touch bases with my co-workers there at the National Weather Service. All the hard work that they do and the sacrifices that they make to cover our share of the responsibilities, so to speak. I also want to thank the government. Mr. Sambola mentioned about our current working conditions, and we've been working on a plan for a new National Weather Service building, and we have the support of the government. So we look forward to the day when we can walk into our own building and have a safer environment to work from.
Well, thank you all, and we echo the same sentiments here. Hazard management is doing a great job, and though they have a big job trying to keep up with all of the things that would impact the community in a huge system coming by or coming over us. So, and we want to thank them also for their efforts in all of this going forward. Sterling, you?
Yes, sir. I was also thank you for inviting me to sit. I can learn as I listen, and I get a historical perspective. But as we, not only heard from the excerpts, But to have the people assembled still, Mr. Ebanks, Mr. Sambo, together with Captain Paul earlier, and of course, Mr. Tibbetts.
And Simon.
And having Simon in the studio, we meld, what passed with what is transpiring now, but also the prospects of what we could be doing going forward. But the thing that is, perhaps should resonate with all of us, let's not take it for a joke. It's not bad weather, in a sense that we may think if we have never, as Mr. Sample said, experienced anything. This can be life-threatening. It's not a party. It's about planning and preparation. So again, thanks very much, Mr. Banks.
Yeah, well, that just about does it for us. And history should be a great teacher for us. And we can learn a lot from history. And that's basically where we're going to end this program. But before that, we want to tell you that this special presentation of Talk Today was being brought to you. Talk Today and CI Retro was being brought to you by Parsons Air Conditioning and Refrigeration and Appliances, and by the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and the other subjects that they have under their.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, but they're doing a great job in trying to keep all this history flowing forward. And as I said, we have to learn from the past, and we'll go out with a few thoughts from some quotations about what history or how history can teach us. So thanks for listening, and good day.
History. The first one comes from Sir Hubert Butterfield, who in 1952 said, "We are all victims as well as agents of the history process." Norman Cousins in 1972 uttered these words about history. "History is a vast early warning system." During the 1st century before the birth of Christ, Dionysius Halicarnassus made this observation about history. "History is philosophy, teaching by examples." Ralph Waldo Emerson in 1859 said, "Believe the faintest of your presentiments against the testimony of all sacred and profane history." And that one, I'm sure, needs a little mulling over. Ralph also said this, "The use of history is to give value to the present hour and its duty." Edward Augustus Freeman on history gave this understanding of history. "History is past politics and politics present history." Lyndon Baines Johnson, former president of the U.S. in 1965, on history uttered these words, "The drumbeat of history is quickening." Our last quotation comes from J.G.A. Pocock. In 1981, he made these observations about history. "History is an exercise in political ironics, an intelligible story of how men's action produce results other than those they intended."
modern solutions to get you through the new normal. Download the Green Turtle app now and top up yours or a loved one's phone with any mobile carrier in any destination. Home delivery of laptops, tablets, phones, accessories, and iTunes and major online retailer gift cards. And now, home deliveries of groceries and courier service. Guaranteed delivery within 2 hours from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit their list of products at greenturtle.ky or download the Green Turtle app today. Green Turtle is not only the future of mobile, but today it can help save a life. Take a ride on the Green Turtle Express today. Download the Green Turtle app, the future of mobile, saving lives today.
Hey, hun, what you doing?
Putting things away in the shed since it's hurricane season. You know, preparing for the better.
Don't you mean preparing for the worst?
No, for the better. Since we have BritK Insurance, we're fully covered against hurricanes. Plus, they have response teams ready to help us file a claim faster. If I were preparing for the worst, I'd watch football all day.
Still don't get it.
Isn't there a match on?
Oh, really?
Let BritK prepare you for the better this hurricane season. Call 949-8699 or visit britk.ky.
Know the signs of a faulty septic system. Sinks and/or toilets that drain slowly, floor drains that overflow, or sewage that is visible outside your home are all signs that your on-site wastewater treatment system is not working properly. If your septic system is faulty, now is the time to fix it to prevent further damage in the event of a storm. For more useful hurricane preparedness tips, visit the Water Authority's website at www.waterauthority.ky or follow us on social media.
Talk Today is brought to you by Fidelity Bank. For all your banking needs, visit fidelitygroup.com. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Also brought to you by greenturtle.ky. Take a ride on the Green Turtle Express today. Download the Green Turtle app, the future of mobile, saving lives today.